Thanks, Chris. Yeah, this is the closing straight, I can't even get my words out. There we go. Home straight. That's the phrase I'm looking for. It's the home straight. So, yeah, it has been a long day, but it's been a good day, hasn't it? But I think one of the things that you sometimes miss out on when you come to conferences is some me time. So we're gonna try and have a little bit of you time now, if that makes sense. Good news from my point of view is I have done this seminar before. Although it was with a bunch of psychiatrists, you'll be pleased to know it's just as bad as giving themselves some me time as probably you guys are. Everyone who cares for other people tends to sort of overdo it slightly on the caring front. So we're going to be talking about filling the tank and burnout. And it's a really difficult thing to talk about, isn't it? Because again, it's one of those sort of very intuitive phrases that doesn't necessarily translate that easily into something that's actually real. You know, what is burnout? If we're not careful, we say, oh, I'm tired. You know, is that burnout? What does it mean? So, I mean, just to sort of, let's start off active, because this is you've got your cake in your belly, keep those blood up near your brain and keep circulating around there. Who wants to sort of just shout out? I'm not going to pass the mic around. What's the definition of burnout? Just shout something out.
Not being able to get up and face another day.
So, yeah, that sort of not being able to get up and face another day. Yep. Yeah, not caring. You've lost the compassion somehow. Yeah, anything else?
Nothing more to give.
Sorry, just this side?
Nothing more to give.
Nothing more to give. You're empty. The tank is empty. Yep. Same. Nothing more to give on this side. Good, okay. They've given it already. Good, okay. So, you know, we're not very good at this, are we, in the caring professions? One of the things I sometimes think is, please can I have some help with burnout? Please can I have some help with tiredness? Just pop the next slide up there. I don't know if any of you have seen this poster up on the staff room wall. This is the stress reduction kit. Phil, can we just put the next slide up? This is the sort of quick, easy, this is cheap because it comes out of the photocopier. This is the stress reduction kit. Bang head here. Now you probably can't hear read the small print there. Place on firm surface, follow directions in circle. Repeat step 2 as necessary or until unconscious. If unconscious, cease stress reduction activity. And it's partly funny, and you see these things stuck up on the common room wall at school and things like that, don't you? But I think it taps into a sort of deeper reality, which is that you've only got 2 speeds. It's like 9 billion miles an hour, or there's unconscious. And humans are not designed to move at 100 miles an hour or 0. You know, somebody once said to me they're meant to move at the speed of love, which is walking pace, so you can hold someone's hand. You know, we're meant to have that middle speed. And there's going to be times when you need to do 100 miles an hour. There's going to be times when you need to do absolutely nothing. I love going away to a cottage in the Scottish Highlands with absolutely no phone signal. Ideally, no one's put Wi-Fi into it yet, and nothing can get to me for a week and a half. I'm not very good at these staycations. I keep checking my email and that sort of thing. But if I actually go away overseas, never sign up to a data plan. I have no intention of accessing my mobile phone overseas, apart from here because I'm working. But you know, just get away. You need the 0. You need the 100 miles an hour. But how do we do that middle? And if we don't, there's a few sort of phrases that tend to get bounced around. I suppose one of them is what you might call burnout or compassion fatigue. Is compassion fatigue the same thing as burnout? We'll come on to that. Leading for the long haul in difficult situations. This is difficult work. This is dealing every day with people who are suicidal, possibly psychotic. I know you do at least one of those. I do both of those things. This is difficult work. What are my personal strategies? I'm going to share a little bit of that. So it'll be a bit of me giving something as well, this seminar. And also what we're going to do is we're going to end up and develop our own personal resilience plan, which sounds very grand, but basically it's only as good as the bit of paper you write it on. So we can develop it, but you have to implement it. Otherwise it is just yet another PDP that gets filed in your folder, isn't it? So we're going to try and come up with some really practical stuff. Now, it is an uphill battle. Got the next slide there, Phil. This is just a picture of Carl Jung. Show me a sane man, and I will cure him for you. So there is a sense that to do this kind of work, you have to have your sort of legs hanging off by the kneecaps a little bit, don't you? And there are strategies that we use that are sometimes not that helpful. A bit of black humor creeps in from time to time, but we have to also be realistic and say, do you know what, in order to do this kind of work, you perhaps do have to be doing some of those things. But again, that's not healthy. It's okay from time to time, but it's not a healthy coping mechanism. So what are healthy coping mechanisms? And also just thinking about burnout. Phil, just the next slide there. Maslow, who was the psychologist who's written most on burnout, he came up with the sort of burnout inventory and things like this. He said it's these three things. So we could come up with a trite definition or something like bouncing back, like we had for resilience, or some of the things you said, which are very good, but I think we need to be more focused about it, because otherwise it becomes too broad, everything's included. And what we're talking about here is three core things. One of them is depersonalization, which is this idea that you're there but not there, that you're sort of talking to a ghost, or that you're feeling as though you're real, but the world is a stage set, or that the world is real, but you're somehow sort of walking through it, and you could somehow sort of walk towards that door through those chairs. You know, there's some sort of detachment from reality. There's something somatic, anxiety-based going on in your body. Emotional exhaustion, you know, that the tank is empty, there's nothing left to give. And also this other thing about reduced personal accomplishment. You know, you're not enjoying the things that you used to enjoy. You're not able to gain pleasure from things that, you know, do you know what? I used to go on a holiday, come back, feel refreshed. I don't anymore. I used to enjoy Monday mornings, and that's why I went into this work. Now I dread Monday mornings. You know, it's those kinds of things where you're missing out increasingly on more and more. So what I'm going to do, because we're going to be practical, I'm going to hand out something called the burnout questionnaire. Now, this sounds very grand. There is nothing special about it. It's just a list of burnout symptoms, and you're meant to score them, okay? So it comes with special instructions, a bit like the stress reduction kit. Keep it the right way up. Don't turn it over, okay? Fill it out. Score each item 1 to 5 according to how much you think it applies to you. 1 is never or no change. 5 is always or much change. It's got a little crib at the top. And just tot it up. So the maximum you can get, there's almost 30 things and there's 5 points. So the maximum you can get is 150. Is that right? 180. No, 150. I was right first time. The maximum you can get is 150. So we're going to sort of, on the other side is the answers. All right, but don't look at that yet. So I'm just going to hand this out, and Phil's got some nice music for us while you fill it in. Okay. So if you haven't quite totted up your score yet, you can tot it up later. I thought this was quite an interesting questionnaire, because it seems to cover quite a lot of areas, doesn't it? So it's talking about sort of, you know, how are you getting on in your job? What about yourself? How are you managing with your energy levels? There's a few there. I mean, question 4 was one that jumped out at me as sort of, you know, that even when you're asleep, you're still waking up tired, if that makes sense. Now, I think we've probably all been there, but it's when you get these things with the other ones. I won't ask too many ones about question 9, particularly those of us with young children. 15. I've been living in a country with a fantastic supply of Pinot Noir, and it's very tempting because it's cheap, isn't it? And it's socially acceptable, and it's one of the ways that we can mask things. And I think particularly men, or there's been lots of articles in the newspapers, haven't there, about, you know, middle-class drinkers. You know, you're not an alcoholic on the cheap lager. It's the Sauv Blanc or the Pinot or something. And I guess one of the ideas around burnout is that it's a sort of pre-breakdown, isn't it? So imagine you're driving along the motorway, the car hasn't broken down yet, but you're starting to get that sort of hot smell that either suggests the cat has come with you or that the car is starting to complain, okay? Neither of which are good situations. But, you know, you need to do something about this now, because the next thing that's going to happen is the car's going to break down, and it's going to say, I'm pulling over onto the hard shoulder, onto the side of the road, and I'm not going anywhere until something's fixed. Burnout's before that. We can fix burnout. You're obviously not allowed to answer yes to question 24 anymore, given the government's recent funding announcements, and that's good. However, I won't say anything about 22 and a few other things that relate to your job, because one of your bosses is sitting in the front row. So, but you know, I mean, there are jobs. I'm joking, because there are jobs that we do because we want to do them. I mean, I'm particularly fortunate. I get paid well to do my job, but not everyone gets paid well to do important jobs, and that's okay for a while. But it does have its toll, and that's why these things add up. So you can turn over and see where you scored. I'm not going to ask anyone for their scores. Some of you might be in this sort of first sort of bracket, 28 to 38. You are impressively mellow with almost no job stress and seemingly practically burnout proof. You are one of those people who wears their pants on the outside, aren't you? And that's what my friend Will found before he was involved in the London bombings that I was talking a bit about earlier. I was in the first seminar I was in, the guy I wrote the books with. He was this sort of super pastor, young guy, fresh out of theological college, working in central London with young adults, doing stuff every evening, all this kind of stuff. And, this idea that actually it's the calm before the storm, isn't it? So those of you who scored very low might want to think, hang on, am I kidding myself? Perhaps I ought to get my spouse to score me on this. That's usually quite a good technique. If you're scoring in single figures, ask someone who knows you well. 38 to 50, you express a low amount of job stress. So that's good. I think that's kind of a good place to be. 51 to 70, a moderate amount of job stress. Again, it's okay. That's all right. That's fine to be there from time to time. For periods of time, there'll be times where there's an awful situation happens and everyone's got to rally round, and that's okay. I think what we're getting there is we're getting into the territory where prolonged periods of time in that are going to begin using up favours. You've got your jar of cookies on the countertop and you've gone to the cookie jar one too many times and there are no cookies left. You've used up favours. You've asked your mate for help with the rent one too many times, etc., etc. You've used up the cookies in the jar. And then 91 and up, a dangerous amount of stress. It does say the solution is consider taking classes in stress reduction. I think probably you also need to make some environmental changes at that sort of level as well. Now, the key thing about this is don't panic about a high score, because it doesn't mean that you're depressed or broken or something like that. But don't ignore a high score. Do something about it. Make some changes. Try and get it down into that middle range. People will vary in their resilience. Some people will be better at certain situations. Some people thrive on a bit of pressure, and that's okay, as long as your adrenal glands are not going to pack out because there's just so much adrenaline's pumping out of them. So people will differ. Some people will find some situations difficult, other situations less difficult. Now, one of the reasons why it's good to do a seminar like this is because it's good to spend some time in self-care. But this is something that's been in the press and the news quite a lot recently. Lots of different organisations have sort of produced a report on burnout amongst physiotherapists or against something, lots of reports have come out and everyone seems to have a report on it. I couldn't find a report about burnout in chaplains, so I'm going to show you the psychiatrist's one. Actually, it's not the psychiatrist's one. This is all consultants in New Zealand. So on the next slide there, 50% of New Zealand senior medical officers have symptoms of burnout. Not the same as burnout. I mean, personally, I'd hope that more than 50% had symptoms of burnout. Otherwise, they're not alive, are they? But, there are a lot of symptoms of burnout. 50% of them are experiencing some degree of stress. 42% work-related, 16% patient-related. So although we all have difficult clients or difficult patients, it's actually the general environments of the job that are contributing, or the home environment or something like that. It's not necessarily the particularly difficult person. They might keep you awake at night for a short period, but clients come and go. They go through periods. It's the sustained pressure that's difficult. So this is a report from ASMS, who are the medical union, basically, in New Zealand, and they're talking about the New Zealand workforce there. And they're saying it's higher than comparable international surveys of other health workers, whatever that means. Next slide. Psychiatrists in their reports score up here in the top right corner. So you want to be in the bottom left. No one's in the bottom left. GPs, actually, which I thought was quite a stressful job, seem to be doing okay. Emergency medicine up there is very stressful. Hidden under the blue square is pathology. So given that their patients are dead, they don't get an awful lot of patient stress, but they obviously do get quite a lot of job stress, if that makes sense. So it's quite surprising sort of things in there. So, this particular survey is putting psychiatry sort of higher up. And I guess it is stressful, but there's quite a well-trodden path, people who come out of medical school, train as GPs, and then go into psychiatry. And one of the reasons why they go into psychiatry is they want more time to deal with the people who are challenging and complex. So I actually think psychiatry is more stressful, but it's got the resources to deal with it. So I have time and support and skills and training and structures and policies and whatnot to deal with extremely difficult situations. My surgical colleagues who just want to get on and do operations, and they've got lots of people with chronic pain and somatization that is not going to respond to the knife, they're the ones who are being asked to do something they're not equipped to do. So I think as long as you're equipped to do it, you can do difficult things. On the next slide, this is just a different survey, just to show that it's all lies and statistics, really. This is where psychiatrists rate on a different survey. So Medscape's one of the big sort of doctors' online forums, and here psychiatry and mental health are scoring down the bottom, with only pathologists faring better. Again, emergency medicine seems to be high up there. Family medicine, OBGYN, things that have shift patterns, lots of out of hours, emergency work. Being more challenging. So I'd like to get into small groups and just turn to the person next to you. And don't get personal. We're not going to get personal here unless you want to. But why do those who care for others struggle with burnout? Just turn around, discuss with the person next to you. You know, why is it a particular curse, if that makes sense? Accountants never get burnout, do they? Why do the caring profession seem to struggle with burnout, and are chaplains better or worse than other caring groups that you know? I get feedback on all the small group sessions. I'm just going to go on and tell you what the consultants in New Zealand said. So pop the next slide up if we can, Phil. This is what the ASM survey said as were the causes for burnout. Heavy workloads, increasing population in New Zealand, particularly around Auckland, no extra doctors, long hours of work, meant to be 40, 45 hours a week, but in practice much more than that. Shift work and on-call duties. Understaffing leading to presenteeism, you know, covering for colleagues when perhaps actually the waiting list ought to go up. You know, and I think there's this overcompensating and, you know, not being able to take a day off. Poor quality leadership. Doctors are not necessarily leaders, and it's quite a difficult job running a health board because you've got nurses and doctors who went into it for one reason, then end up becoming the leaders. And, you know, the leadership of health organisations is not always fantastic. It can be fantastic, but it can be not very good. Medium-sized DHBs, district health boards, what they mean by that is, you know, the small ones, everyone expects a not very good service. Rural areas, people expect to a certain extent a not very good service. The big cities, you expect it to be sharp, but you've got the resources. The medium ones, they kind of struggle because they've got this expectation burden they can't meet. Females more than males, and the worst age group is 30 to 39, so I'm happily just beyond that now. I know most of you are still in that age group, so that's okay. Why is it important to deal with burnout? I mean, this is one of the things that's coming out of the research now, and I think one of them is, Phil, just the next slide if we can, just that it's bad for your well-being. It's not good for you. It's a precursor to depression. It's bad for your physical health, particularly if you're drinking too much or not exercising, and, you know, there's never enough time. One of the things I've learned is that if I'm going to stay fit, it has to be as part of my daily routine. So I cycle to and fro to work. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. When I'm home, I want to be doing stuff with the kids. I'm not going to spend all Saturday charging up mountains when I want to be doing stuff with the family, you know. So I've got to build it into my day, or else it just doesn't happen. That lunchtime swim on a Thursday, that sounds a good idea, really just not going to happen. There's always something or someone knocking on your door. It's bad for your clients as well. So you get in association with decreased quality of care and also making errors. You make mistakes. In particular, medical errors, I suppose I'm particularly aware of. All of the medical defence organisations run training in stress management and burnout. And it's not because they like you, it's because it's expensive for them. Because doctors make mistakes and the defence organisations end up paying out to settle the claim.
It also impacts the ethical credibility of the service that you provide.
Yep, exactly. So Lady just saying that it impacts the ethical credibility. You know, if you're tired, worn out, unprofessional, etc., it doesn't come across particularly well, or if you're making mistakes. Yeah. There's a couple of more concerning situations I'm just going to flag. I'm not going to sort of talk about these in any great detail. One of those is what you might call compulsive caring. And this is where literally your whole identity is too wrapped up in what you do. You can't take a holiday. You can't retire. Or if you do retire, you drop dead the day after you retire because you have no concept of what not working looks like. It's a pattern of caring rather than feeling, and it serves your own emotional ends. I mean, a related thing that you might be familiar with is people with anorexia nervosa are often very good cooks and spend a lot of time preparing food for other people, just not for themselves. It's this sort of, I can care for everybody else as an alternative to caring for me, because the moment I open the lid, I don't know what I'm going to find inside, so I'm just going to externalize everything and put it out there. You could say it's rooted in childhood learning. You know, we're told that, you know, you mustn't make mummy sad, or don't do that, mummy gets stressed, you know, so we keep the emotions repressed and settled down. I think Christians get a bad press here because the stakes are high, aren't they? And that doesn't mean that your fillet's hanging from the roof. What that means is that there is no plan B. And I'm sure you've all heard that sermon, there is no plan B. It's just 12 apostles, and Jesus got 12 apostles, and they're people who stand in their shadows. There ain't no plan B. It's up to the church to save the world, okay? Huge expectations, you know, if you're not... And then these verses from Isaiah where it says, spend yourself on behalf of the needy. And Christians are particularly bad at sort of over-committing. I'm always like that verse in the Bible that says, the Lord desires living sacrifices, not burnt offerings. Okay, so that's the antidote verse. We still want our sacrifices to be alive. Not crawling off the altar, that is sometimes the problem, but we want living sacrifices in the kingdom of God, not burnt offerings. Okay, and compulsive caring at its heart is a form of OCD. OCD, obsessions and compulsions, to take away from deep, scary fears about people you love coming to harm or yourself coming to harm. That's at the heart of OCD. And it can be treated as OCD if it's formulated as such. It's a pattern people get into. The other one is compassion fatigue, which I suppose is a sort of more severe form of burnout. This is where it begins to get more personal. You're not just involved in the job, and it's not the job stress or the family stress and the circumstantial factors causing burnout. It's the individual cases are now starting to get to you. And you're involved in the trauma, you're experiencing the emotions of those you care for. You start blaming, you start self-isolating, you start having nightmares and flashbacks. And you all know from your basic listening and training that one of the things you're meant to do in countertransference and working with people is you're meant to say, hang on, why am I feeling this emotion? Why am I feeling confused and lost in this situation? Maybe I'm not confused and lost. Maybe I'm experiencing what the person in front of me is feeling. You've all been taught that. And that's called the countertransference. It's one of the core skills of counselling and listening. But you need to be able to stand back, and you need to know yourself, and you need to be getting your own supervision and so on to be able to spot that that's what's going on. Otherwise, you really do feel lost and alone and frightened and confused and so on, and you get into compassion fatigue. So it's good that we're paying attention to this. This is, on the next slide, a new line in the Hippocratic Oath that a New Zealand doctor has decided to put in. Phil, can you pop the next slide up for us, please? Oh, he's in the middle of something. In a moment will appear a new slide for the Hippocratic Oath, and it says, I will attend to my own health and well-being and abilities in order to provide care of the high standard. And this guy, Sam Hazeldine, is a New Zealand doctor, and he's reading through the Hippocratic Oath, and he thought it sounded absolutely wonderful, but there wasn't a line in there for the doctors. So he commissioned the World Health Organization and has managed to get this line added to the official Hippocratic Oath. And I think it's quite important because actually doctors are pretty bad at looking after themselves, aren't they? There's quite a peak in mortality after retirement for doctors. They're not very good at retiring. They don't know what to do with themselves when they retire. They're so used to being the boss or the consultant, whatever it is. They don't actually know how to step into another role in life. And doctors have a higher suicide rate compared to other members of the population, that kind of thing. So doctors are not very good at caring for themselves. And I'm hoping chaplains are slightly better because they'll actually have sessions like this. Although having said that, the first time I did this talk was to a bunch of psychiatrists. And it was like, wow, okay, we need to be getting this into some of our agendas as well because we're not bulletproof. Okay. Yeah. Right, okay, yeah, so the teaching equivalent to the Hippocratic Oath doesn't have anything in. And it wouldn't surprise me. It's all obligation. Thou shalt do this and keep the needs of the child central. And I mean, one of the things that I was taught by my last trainer I worked with before I became a consultant was he said, when you go to work on Monday morning, go primarily for yourself. Go for yourself to be a better person and to be as good and healthy a person as you can do. If you do that, you will be a better boss and a better team member. And if you do that, then you'll be a better doctor for your patients. So if you go to work to help your patients, you're kind of 2 levels wrong. You've got to go to work to help yourself, first of all, if that makes sense, and then help your team, and then that will help those around you. Okay, and Richard Branson and other people in the business world have said this. It says, work with Virgin are very good at this. Happy team members equals happy customer, and that sort of starts off with happy you. Do you have a rewards program, an incentives program? I'm joking because I know full well that most care organisations don't have a rewards program or an incentives program. There's a friend of mine who she was our lodger for a while she was studying for her masters, and she's got a masters in HR. And she's now working for one of the big banks in their rewards department. I had no idea what a rewards department was. And it's the bit that deals with all the bonus and the staff perks and all this kind of stuff. And the NHS don't have one of them. I mean, there is a incentive scheme as such and a career progression and so on, but it's not a rewards department. You've got your iSave, okay, where you can get your reductions. And we're not very good at rewarding perhaps as much as we ought to. And that's why it was great, wasn't it, to have those acknowledgements and honouring just before lunch, to actually say, do you know what, these people have done 10 years service, 15 years service, isn't that fantastic? And we need to see more of that, because charities and the caring professions are not very good at that. They just serve, die. So we've got to sort of have that slight middle pace, haven't we? Okay, so just the next slide if we can, Phil. What I'd like you to do, if you can, is share some stories. Now, if there are no ups and downs in your life, it means that you are dead. Okay, so this is just an ECG to illustrate that point. But you are under no obligation to share anything. But what I would like you to do is get into slightly bigger groups, maybe of 5 or 6 or something like that. And if one person in each group wants to share a time when perhaps they went through a more difficult patch during their life and perhaps had to make some adjustments and what helped them come through that, or are they still in the middle of it? You can be as open as you want to, but if nothing's going on, you can just talk about whether you're going to come to the spit roast later on tonight. So just a few minutes just to maybe share a story in slightly bigger groups if we can, just one person. Fantastic. Thank you so much to those who shared. I know that's brave, and I'm not going to ask for any feedback for that, but hopefully it was helpful to hear some stories, maybe get some ideas and that sort of thing. What I want to do, if we just pop the next slide up, is just get practical for the next half of it. We're having a lot of focus on Fight Club today, which is not a film I watch every week, but there is. Do you know that every single scene in the movie Fight Club is crafted to illustrate a particular Freudian principle? So initially, when they go down into the basement, it's the dark unconscious with the puddle that represents the id, which is suppressed. And then by the end of the film, the basement is where the explosives are made, and it's the organizing place for mayhem, which is what happens in psychosis when the id takes over and causes chaos. And that's why it's called Project Mayhem, because the id is now in charge. Anyway, different story. There's lots and lots and lots to learn about Fight Club. I once watched it with a psychoanalyst. Don't make that mistake. But what we are going to do is we're all going to line up in 2 lines, and we're going to give each other massive hugs like this. And we're going to practice self-care for the rest of the session. We'll have boys on this side and girls on this side. And no, okay, all right. Some of you thought that I was being serious, didn't you? We're not going to do that. And there's 2 reasons for that. First of all, group hugs are for the Australian football field. And the second thing is that's not really self-care, is it? That's a bit of Hollywood that sort of snuck in. And again, the psychoanalytical principle being illustrated here is regression to an infantile and oral stage of development. And we don't want to do that. We want to be at a higher stage of development, don't we? So what we are going to do is have a little bit of a think about self-care. And just to illustrate that, let's think about our environment. This next picture I've put up is it's a CD cover by a band called 100 Hours. And they used to be the YWAM house band a couple of decades ago rather, when I was a youngster and used to go to those festivals and that sort of thing. It was often 100 Hours who were playing at those festivals. And there's an equation on the front. And this was a formula that was invented by a guy called Win Fountain, who's an Auckland businessman, actually. Even though it's an international band, but they're based in the UK. But it goes something like this. In a week, you've got 168 hours, if my maths is correct. If you sleep for 8 hours, 7 days a week, okay, that's 7 times 8, that's 56 hours. So take that away, and that gives you 112 hours left in your week. If you do basic activity, what's your bare minimum kind of thing? Forget washing, that's a luxury. Right, you've got to eat 3 times a day. That's your basic. So half an hour, 3 times a day, so 21 times a week. That's 10 and a half hours. And then the other basic human activity, of course, is to go to church for an hour and a half on a Sunday morning. And if you add those up, it conveniently comes to 100. And the idea here is that you've got 100 hours. How are you going to eat yours, if that makes sense? And you may think, okay, well, I've got 40 hours for work and 5 hours for commuting. And, think, hang on, that's 50 hours left. Didn't know I had 50 spare hours in the week. All those soap operas I watched, goodness me. Where did it all go? And it's actually quite interesting to do a sort of 100 hours grid. Just get yourself a sort of 10 by 10 grid and just work out roughly what you do in your 100 hours each week. And it's just an interesting exercise because you may find that you can fill all the hours. And I would say if you actually know what you do for 100 hours a week, you're probably approaching burnout. I think we shouldn't aim to plan. There are some perfectionists out there, they need to buy the book, who will fill every hour of the day with a planned activity. And actually, I'd have thought if you can fill 70 hours, that's probably about right. So you've got a job, a commute, some stuff with the family, maybe a hobby, and something else that pops in there, like a book group or something like that. Then the rest of it is free time, and it should be free time for using unstructured stuff, for catching up, to allow some flexibility, some give and some take. So it's quite interesting doing a sort of 100-hour activity and seeing where you come out. What we are going to do is do a bit of self-care. Just on the next slide there, I've put some of my friends up because these are pigs, very happy. They don't know what's coming to them, but there we go. You hear the joke about the chicken and the pig, and they're in this farmyard, and this double-decker bus rolls past the farmyard, and on the advert on the side of the bus is this plate, this amazing fried breakfast. And the bus goes by, and the two of them look at each other, and they just go, it's absolutely delicious. Absolutely delicious. And the chicken said, we've made that. We helped contribute that. And the pig turns to him and says, your contribution, I'm commitment. So these pigs are still happy. These pigs are still happy in their state, and they are as happy as a pig in the proverbial. So let's think about how we can do that. And what I'd like you to do, just jot this down on your pads, because we're going to put it on the plan later. Well, no, you can put it on the plan if you want to. You can start writing on the plan I've handed out. This is your personal resilience plan. Have a think about some things you're going to do each day. Okay? Some things you're going to do each day, some things you're going to do each month or each week. So, for example, it could be going to church, or it could be going for a hike in the countryside once a month, something like that. It doesn't have to be weekly or monthly. What are the things you're going to do every day to self-care? What are the things you're going to do regularly or semi-regularly? And what are the things that you're going to do annually? Obviously, every year I go on a 6-day silent retreat at an abbey, not. But, some people will have some sort of annual activity. I probably ought to, shouldn't I? Shh. But what you're going to do annually, weekly, monthly, and daily. And just start jotting some things in there. I'll put 3 times 3 minutes, but we'll see how we go. Have a think. Be creative. Do this in small groups as well. Start off by yourself. Once you've jotted a few things down, share with the people next to you. Okay. If you could pop the next slide up for me, Phil, as well, that would be great. So I'm going to give you a bit more time later to finish off the bottom half of it, or you can finish that off another time. But this slide, I asked the junior doctors where I work what they thought was good for this. And actually, some of these slides were put together by my registrar, Laura, because she did this as one of her presentations, and then I sort of nicked a few slides and extended it a bit. So thanks to Laura. But this is what they were saying. Plan meal breaks and go out. Now, this is an inpatient unit for where I work. So what that means is that they actually went off the unit to the main hospital canteen or a local cafe, or just went and talked to the ducks or something like that. So have your meal break and go out. Physical activity, some of them have got these stepometers, or your smartphone might do it for you. See your difficult or tricky clients first. Don't procrastinate. If you know you've got a difficult person to see, do it first thing. Wake them up if need be. Get it over and done with. That's what I sometimes do. But I mean, and your week may not work like that. It might be but timetable it earlier in the week. Don't timetable the person who you know is going to be difficult on a Friday. Wind down with something productive or enjoyable, preferably not Pinot Noir. Connect with peers and colleagues and attend meetings. I want to let you into a secret. Your schools are all still standing, and none of them are burned down while you've come away to this conference. So it's okay to take time out to come away to meetings, to invest in what you call those second quadrant activities, important but non-urgent, yeah? So it's important to actually get to stuff and not just be consumed with the busyness of work. Go and have that meeting with the head teacher, the year head. Don't cancel meetings all the time. Laughter and fun are allowed. Chocolate in particular is allowed, I think. Always have a treat in your desk that you can nibble or something, whatever it is. Avoid taking work home. The commute has some value. Now, the next slide, I just put a picture up of the Botanic Gardens there. I think they're Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. Anyway, that's what Google tells me. I went to them 26 years ago, didn't I? Like everything else in Melbourne. I did actually go to them, and they still look as nice. And I used to walk home across the meadows in Edinburgh. So occasionally I'd walk home or cycle home, and I'd go across the meadows, and it'd be like, right, okay, work's finished. It's home now while I cycle up the last hill to get home. These are some of my sort of tips, longer-term tips. So in terms of over sort of 10 years or so of being a consultant, how I've managed to stay sane during that time. Have your finger in another pie or two is quite important. I think if you're doing full-time school chaplaincy, it's quite difficult to do full-time. It doesn't particularly matter what it is. It could be you're part-time and you do pottery for a day a week or something like that. It could be that you are in the school, but you're coaching the football team or something like that. Have something else, because the idea basically is when one part of your life's going well, have another part of your life that you can enjoy. When one's going badly, have a part that you can enjoy, and vice versa. So I've done quite a lot of education and teaching over the years, and to do with electronic and digital health, and I can sort of mix and match. So one's stressful and no one's doing the right policies in e-health, and they're all Luddites and they can't turn the computer on, and that's okay because I'm enjoying the clinical work. And then vice versa, when that's going well, I can produce a pretty graph from the computer. So it keeps me happy. Share the pain. Swap difficult clients, okay? If you've got someone difficult, if you can, if there's another chaplain, swap them. Or swap them between the chaplain and the psychologist, okay? You see him for a bit, I'll see him for a bit. And I'm just being very matter-of-fact about this and treating clients as objects for a little bit. So forgive me for doing that. But it's okay to do that in order to stay sane. I would do this sometimes with GPs. GPs had very, very difficult patients. And I'd say, I'll see him in clinic for a bit. Or actually, I've seen them in clinic for ages. Can you see them for a bit? And we'd swap some of the more difficult people. Have cheeky days off and date your spouse. That's very important. Just random days. Take a random Tuesday off on leave and just do nothing. Not get out of bed. Take the kids to school, go back to bed. All kinds of things are possible, okay? So just have random cheeky days off. Have 2 weeks holiday, not one. Obviously, a week's vacation's good, a week's holiday, but 2 week holiday, it's good. 3 weeks, you're getting bored. I'm getting bored and itchy feet by that point, certainly anyway. But 2 weeks holiday is quite good, I find. Work flexible hours in conjunction with colleagues. Now, I've never done this personally because I've always wanted to be there for the kids going to school and for bath time and that kind of stuff. But I may do at some point. I might work long hours and do 4 days a week. Might flexi. The job I'm going back to in Edinburgh, my colleague works 4 days a week from 8 till 5:30, and then she doesn't come in on Friday. She just answers the phone if she has to, So find different ways to do it. Realize it's not all about you and develop your spirituality. Hopefully you're doing that already. Learn it's not all about you and drop some balls. Okay, it's definitely very therapeutic to drop balls from time to time. It makes you realize that it's not all about you. The world carried on revolving in its axis. No one died. Okay. So I think it's okay to drop balls, even better, drop balls therapeutically and think, what can I learn from this about myself? And mix it up. It's not just one job for life. So you might do this for a few years. I'd rather you did chaplaincy for a few years, went off and did something else for a couple of years and then came back to it, than did it for 10 years, had a nervous breakdown, and never came back to it ever again. Yeah? So mix it up. It's all right to mix things up. You know, most people will have 3 jobs during their adult life. It's not that I was a tailor and my father was a tailor and my father's father was a tailor before me, and, you know, it's handed down in families. We can mix it up, move it around. How many of you were chaplains from age 18 or 21? None of you. Okay, proves my point. Mix it up. But just because you're a chaplain now doesn't mean you have to be one forever until you retire. Sorry. Give plenty of warning for any career changes. Okay, I'm going to skip over this bit just a little bit. Jump forward to there's a slide with a big cross on it. Just go forward a few slides if you can, Phil. I'm talking about the midlife crisis. Oh, Phil? Sorry, we've got it there. Talk about a bit about the midlife crisis, because there's this idea, isn't there, that the midlife crisis is just buying a motorbike, and that's what you do, and you get a motorbike and off you go. And no, not that one, the one before that. No, that one, there we go. We all need to do something in midlife. I think this is one of my sort of pet theories. I'm not quite sure how true this is, but maybe it's because I'm just feeling this. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about why I came to New Zealand and why I'm going home again. And it wasn't a midlife crisis. It wasn't the equivalent of buying a motorbike. Because what that is, it's a big change, but it's also a bad change. So, you know, buying a motorbike and then falling off it, it's a really, really, really silly thing to do. Or buying a motorbike and just going away the whole time and avoiding home, you know. Not good midlife crises to have. What is perhaps a better one is a big thing and a good thing, which is a move, as long as you do the move for the right reasons. And we did the move coming to New Zealand for a whole bunch of reasons too. Just to sort of, we had spent time overseas when I was young with my folks and my wife as well. And we wanted to have that experience. And we went into it with open eyes. And most importantly, we left a good thing in Edinburgh. That we're actually really, really enjoying Edinburgh. We just thought if we don't do it now, we're never going to do this for another 20 years until we're sort of retired or whatever it is. And also when we came here, we had the normal ups and downs of arriving here. You know, I remember getting off the plane and driving right through the back streets of Auckland. The taxi took us and we ended up in this tired motel and it was raining. And I thought, what have I done to my family? I want to go home again, you know. So we've had all the usual sort of immigrant up and downs. But actually at the moment, we're actually really enjoying New Zealand. We could stay another year, we could stay another 2 years if we want to, but I think we decided it's not 20 years, so given we've made the decision, we want to go back home. So, you know, we're leaving a good thing as well. So don't do that. Don't do your small changes that are bad. Don't get stuck in midlife cruise or monotony. Try and sort of break it up. Do something. I think, you know, don't look back at the age of 60 and think, oh, you know, well, I didn't do anything with my adult life, or I just did exactly the same thing all the way through. So how do you mix it up? You know, can you do good changes that are small? Can you have this sort of melody in your life? And that's thinking about the M's, but it's just this sort of, I have a daily rhythm, I have a weekly rhythm, I have a monthly rhythm, I have an annual rhythm, I've got a creative and varied life. These are some of the things that are associated with good self-care. And just jump on 2 slides if we can, Chris. Some of you might recognize this if you've studied some psychology or therapy. These are Erikson's stages for life. The first 5 sort of happen before the age of 18, and they're not a million miles away from some of the sort of Freudian or Piagetian stages of child development you probably know about. But the ones I want to sort of pick up there are about early adulthood and late adulthood, so 6 and 7. Early adulthood, Erikson was about intimacy versus isolation. Am I going to find my partner, or am I going to be alone? And interestingly enough, that is not negotiated by finding a partner, because you can be unhappy in marriage. It's negotiated by finding yourself and being able to be able to be intimate and be able to be alone, and then choosing. You know, you should be happy with your singleness before you get married. Should be another way to phrase that, if that makes sense from marriage courses and so on. And then he moves on to This one here, generativity versus stagnation. What am I going to do in the second half of my adult life? Am I going to start a new business completely, or am I going to try and leave a legacy? And that's what he means by generativity. He means begin to leave a legacy, begin to mentor, begin to pass on, begin to encourage, begin to do yourself out of a job, for want of a better description, or stagnation. And the problem with that stage is that if you don't negotiate that right, you come to the last stage. And the last stage is called ego integrity versus despair. So you either get to your retirement years and you think, I fought the good fight. I'm happy with my life. I've contributed my bit. I haven't changed the world and won a Nobel Prize, but I've contributed. That's okay. Or do you look back on my life and think, I've made a right mess of that, and do you know what? It's too late to change it. And that's the despair. That is the depression of old age, that it's too late to go back. You're never going to be young again. You're never going to have that energy again. So most of us are sort of rough. I've put a fairly broad arrow there to cover the excellent age range of the audience. But we're sort of there, aren't we? Thinking about this sort of midlife crisis, second half of adult life. And the problem is if we don't get it right, what's next? The only things that are left are retirement and death. So actually thinking about, it's true. If you're 40, like me, I've had kids, I've got married, bought a house. What's next? Retirement, death. Oh, yes, that's true, actually. Yeah, they're being the ski generation. So, yeah. But this idea that actually if we begin to think about this, I'm putting some of these things out here, like, the midlife crisis, the Erickson stages, perhaps to give you fresh ways of thinking about this. Self-care is not about doing a little questionnaire and getting better at doing the little questionnaire like we were saying at the start of the day. It's about thinking, where am I in my life? I want to be a little bit reflective about this. I want to think about it. I want to make some practical changes. Help is available. So on the last slide there, I feel I ought to mention that the house resource. So there are chaplaincy and wellbeing support groups, and hopefully, you are part of or are able to be part of one of those, and you can continue some of these discussions maybe in your support group. And one of the things you might want to do is spend a little bit of time now finalising the rest of your plan and thinking about what goes in that and taking it to your next chaplaincy and wellbeing support group and discussing it and thinking, right guys, keep me accountable for this. This is what I want to do. This is an area where I'm lacking. These are the kinds of things that I want to do to be developing personal resilience. So there's a few things left on here. My supportive and caring relationships are, that's quite a scary one to fill in. The ways I calm down and regain perspective are. My current health and fitness levels are. Okay? My long-term goals are. We're not, very good at the spirit and the mind, aren't we? Not so good at the body. So spend a few minutes just filling that in, and then we'll wrap it up and close. Okay. I'm not going to ask you to share that. I am going to ask you to do something with it. So when you get home, don't put it in the circular filing cabinet on the floor with your other conference notes. Put it somewhere. Take it to your next support group, share it, discuss it, develop it, show it to your nearest and dearest and see if they agree with it, see if they can help you stay accountable with it. Just thought I'd finish just by reading Psalm 23, because I think we're sort of closing up. I mean, you're going to be, some staying for dinner, but heading home. So some will be heading home into the night. So let's do this, Psalm 23. This is the Message version. God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You've bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your words, you let me catch my breath, and you send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through Death Valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head, and my cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. So can I say thank you so much for having me today, and my prayer is that you would travel safe, have a restful day, and be back for more fun tomorrow. Thank you so much.